So today we're going to be building a bandsaw box out of pine. Of course, we cut all the pieces equally and then glue them up real thoroughly because you don't want any seams in your box at all. And then you clamp it all up and leave it overnight. Make sure you wash out the glue to the excess glue. It just helps. Cleans things up a little bit. So this is where it starts. You're cutting out the actual shape of the box, and the drawer will go inside of that. Now this takes time. It's just, this is the fourth one I've made, and I still struggle a little bit with the bandsaw. I have a 10 tooth per inch blade, and I've read quite a bit that other people are using 4 tooth TPI, tooth per inch blades, and that makes a big difference when trying to make tight cuts. So I will be trying that soon. But it's just a matter of patience, taking your time and really watching what you're doing. There's a ton of sanding that goes on. You know, I really shortened this video up just 'cause everybody knows how to sand. But this is something you really want to spend time on. I start with 60 grit, I go to 80 grit, 120, and finish with 180. I just can't overemphasize enough how important it is to make sure you sand thoroughly. It really makes the box look nice and clean. So the first part of creating the drawer is cutting the back off. And here's really where it gets tough. This cut has to be perfect because this is your drawer cutout. And you make one mistake with this bandsaw cut, it's going to show up drastically on your drawer opening. And it affects even how it opens and closes. So you really have to take your time here. And it gets tricky near the end because you're going back to where you opened the box up. You'll see that in a second here, but it does get really tight on this. One more turn, and then you see where the opening is there. That's a tricky spot. Usually you always end up with some kind of notch there, so you have to really, really get this cut right. Just, again, focus, take your time, make sure you're ready to go, and complete your cut. Of course, you have to glue up that seam now. You know, and I used to use CA glue for this. I now use that Tight Bond Quick Set Clear. The CA glue just sets too fast, and you don't have any time to manipulate it, and it leaves a bit of a gap, you know, because you can't clamp it. You just have to push it together, and it sets. With this, you can really get a good clamp, get all that glue squeeze out, and you won't even see that line. Something I learned the hard way. So let that set overnight. Go ahead and remove your clamps. And here we're just prepping the drawer. So we're getting everything all sanded on the exterior of the drawer before we actually start. We'll cut the back and front off of that, cut out the center of the drawer and glue it all back up again. But it's key to get this all really nice and clean and make sure that your box, your drawer, fits properly in the box. So overall, the fit looks pretty good. Now we have some sanding to do. We'll need to take this over to the spindle sander and clean up the inside of that, the box opening. I'm using 80 grit here. And you definitely want to do this before you glue your back on. I've made that mistake before and then had to do it all by hand. And that was no fun, and it didn't come out well at all. I know I've mentioned it a few times, but a lot of sanding involved, and it really pays off in the end. Okay, we're about to build the drawer now, so we're going to cut the back off of the drawer and the front of the drawer off. And then I always like to mark what's front and back. That way I know when I go to reassemble it, they're going to line up the grain and everything. Now, of course, this is going to be a business card holder. That's the idea. So I'm going to make a square drawer opening here. So I'll cut one side first, move to the other side, and then I'll just start sliding the fence over, basically creating a dado, the width of the blade, 3/16 of an inch. So then that way I can turn it and rotate it and get the bottom cut done. Now we're ready to cut the bottom of the drawer. And of course, more sanding. Now we're going to glue the drawer back together, putting the back and front on. And again, I can't overemphasize, you use tons of glue. That way you basically get a seamless, you don't even see the gap. Because there'll be a slight gap. No matter how much you try and sand, there'll be a little bit of a gap. And that glue actually helps fill that when you go to stain it. The more time you spend here, and it's all about patience and just taking your time to get everything all lined up as close as you can, it makes a better fit for your drawer and your box, and it also requires less sanding to try and even things out and get those clamps good and tight. And you certainly don't want to spend time sanding glue off because you're going to take too much wood with it. So it's worth the extra 10 minutes to clean all this glue up from inside the drawer, outside the drawer. Just make sure you have all your glue cleaned up. So we'll let that sit and dry for 12 hours and come back and start sanding. Now we're putting a little chamfer, just deburring that edge a little bit. I'm using 120 sandpaper here. I've used a router before, but it's a little too extreme. I think it's easier just to go ahead and do it by hand. Just take your time and make sure that everything matches all the edges. So here we're on the main box, and we're going to put the back on. We're going to glue the back on now. Okay, now that we've got all the glue out of there, we can put 2 additional clamps on and let that sit and dry for 12 hours. So while that back is being glued on, we're going to go ahead and make the drawer pull. And now we're going to attach that drawer pull to the drawer itself. This can be really tricky. So again, you got to take your time here. I've tried drawing lines, and it's been nothing but more trouble than it's worth. It's easier just to eyeball it. You'll get it close enough, and it'll look great. So now that the back is dry and on the box, we're going to sand off the little bit of excess that was hanging over there and even it all out. So one last final sanding here. And there's your box complete. And there's the entire project completed with the drawer pull installed and the drawer all set.